Neanderthal Storytime 2. I stand over the edge gazing down at water on the Oberbaum Bridge in Berlin over the Spree River. I have been kicked out of my home for exploiting myself. It is not like I wanted to. Hitler, that was the reason why I did it. My family is in ruin financially and mentally. So yes, I exploited myself so that we would not starve to death. Unfortunately, my father found out I took my mom's red dress, and he knew exactly why I did it. God, was it a surprise coming home and having him point a gun at me and telling me to get the fuck out! I look down the river and see the city. It is so silent. It is the paranoia pervading the air. I then look down again and close my eyes. I want to end it all. Jumping is the only way to liberate myself. Jumping into ice-cold water in November. I put one foot out and then hear a man say, "Stop!" I turn to my right and see a man who is probably a few years older than me, shaking and walking towards me slowly. He then looks me in the eyes and says, "Whatever is wrong cannot be fixed by jumping, but it may if you take my hand." I ponder and say to myself, no one can help me. However, I can see that he would jump in with me if I jumped. So, I reached out and he took my hand with a very tenacious grip. I fall to my knees, and then he grabs my face and says, "Come with me if you need a place to stay tonight." I look up at him and see his charismatic smile with a slight tear in his left eye and say, "Let's go." And we are on our way to his apartment. He said he only lived 2 blocks away. Silence was all as I walked with him. The only thing he said to me was his name, Jack Wolfgang, and to which I replied, "Thank you for helping me, Jack." Before I know it, we are there, and I see an apartment complex with giant windows that are in the shape of a Roman arch, and the white brick makes up the whole building. It is beautiful, especially with all the snow. He pointed to the 3rd floor on the left-hand side of the building and said, "That one is mine." It was huge, half as wide as the building as most of the other ones were only a quarter, and not to mention this one had a balcony overlooking the river. He is loaded. Soon as I get up to his apartment, he tells me feel free to take a shower and make yourself at home. I smile and say a shower sounds great to me. I walk into the bathroom he pointed towards and could not believe my eyes. It was the size of my bedroom. I take a quick shower, and then he shows me his study. I walk in and see a swastika flag and a big eagle statue in there as well. I try not to faint at the sight of all of this. I then see that he has a notebook on his desks and a huge bookshelf on the wall, so I can tell he is very much into literature. On this desk, he underlined a passage by T.S. Eliot, "Do I dare disturb the universe?" I am intrigued by his notebook as he shows me a picture of his father and says that he is a lieutenant for the SS. I faint at the sound of those words and then wake up, not remember anything at all. Several hours later, I see my identification papers on the table and Jack standing there with contempt towards me. He picked them up and pointed to the big J on the top of my paper. His face was red with anger and hatred. I got up immediately and picked up my papers and looked at him while trying to hold in my tears. It was inevitable they fell on the floor like raindrops. Emotions are like gravity. Sometimes we just have to let go. I dropped to my knees. Never have I ever begged for anything in my life, but I begged him to let me stay here. I told him I would clean up after him and cook for him and satisfy any of his needs. Did I ever think it would work? Never! Here is a guy whose dad is a high-level SS officer, and I am asking him to keep me in hiding. Me, a Jewish girl in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Berlin. If I was him, I would feel sorry for me, but honestly, I would probably turn myself down. I finally see him look at me as if he was contemplating the harsh truth that I just revealed to him. He takes a deep breath and says, "You have beautiful blue eyes, radiant black hair, and your smile is nothing but mesmerizing." That's it. He thinks I'm gorgeous, but he realizes how fucked up of a situation this is. I pick up my papers and head towards the door. I open it and then have it halfway closed before he shouts, "Wait, Elizabeth!" I then peeked back inside and saw him coming towards me. I then fully opened the door and made way back into his apartment. He shuts the door the second I take my hand off it, and pushes me against the wall and kisses me. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I was enthralled by him. Everything about him enthralled me. He then said, "You are not going anywhere." This was love at first sight. Our first argument, he saw me more than anyone else has seen me in years. He saw my true self. The next morning, I wake up and hear someone yelling, "No, no!" I wake up Jack and tell him someone is yelling outside. He slowly gets up and we make way towards the balcony. Everyone was hissing and cursing about the newspaper that came out that conveyed a Jewish teenage girl killed a German officer yesterday, November 7th, 1938. We went back inside as Jack was appalled after hearing the news. He told me to sit down in his living room, and I could tell he had something very serious to say to me. He told me he looked through his dad's desk one night and saw pictures of a camp called Dachau, which is in Dachau, Germany, just a little bit north of Munich. He said that more and more people were being taken there even from as far north as Munich. I gasped. I thought of my family, and I got up and beseeched him. My family could be taken there. He nodded and said, "Unfortunately, that is a possibility." I ran towards the door, but he ran towards me and grabbed me and said, "They know where I live. We will have to find a new place." The next night he told me he was going to his father's house to get his key to a house in the countryside, somewhere very discreet, not in the middle of the nation's largest city. I told him that I would clean up for him, which I did until I heard screaming and people shouting at each other. November 9th, 1938, I looked out to see a few buildings on fire in the distance. The one building that I recognized down the river was a synagogue. Dear God, I thought to myself, hatred pervades like fog and clouds our perceptions of clarity. I then see one woman who is about my age running away with a wound in her calf as she has been shot. Without thinking, I run down and try to save her by getting her back up here. I did not stop to think that Jack would think of this, but I did not care at all. The only thing I thought about was a poor girl bleeding to death because of one preconceived crime: being Jewish. I made it to where she fell and is fighting to get up. I put my arm around her and then tried to pull her up. I fail the first time, as she is as limp as one could be, but the second time I succeed in carrying her a few feet towards the building. Then, suddenly I hear sadistic laughter from the Nazis, and I look and see them about 50 feet away. I try to open the door before and shove her inside before they get to me, but I was not nearly quick enough. They hit my kneecap from behind and then hit me several times with their nightsticks, again and again. Once we are both down, we are dragged into a truck while they are having a great laugh. In the truck, I see several other people that are close to my age and some much older. No children were in the truck, which brought me a slight sense of satisfaction. However, that dissipated very quickly as I looked through the crevice to see anything that was Jewish being burned or looted. This brought chills to my spine. A law firm run by a Jewish man was burned to the ground, and it wasn't even midnight. Many other Jewish-run businesses were also burned. This was the night of the broken glass, the stepping stones towards our annihilation. I try not to faint again, as I may want to have an idea as to where we are going, in case, just in the slightest case, I can evade from tyranny. Then suddenly I envision myself running against Hitler's regime, running against it all, just like Jesse Owens did by defying the Hitler regime in the last Olympics. Once I stopped envisioning this, I heard them all, women, children, mothers and fathers weeping. I couldn't fathom all of this horror at the time, so I stared through the crevice of this army truck and saw it began to snow heavily. No one talked to each other during the ride. We are all in our own states of despondency. Although the snow gave me a trivial satisfaction because I pondered thinking that maybe those are God's tears, and they are not rain, because God has shed so many that they have become dry. God's tears are dry. But will he take action or just weep over these atrocities? I then realized this is what Jack was talking about. We are going to Dachau, Camp Dachau, the first concentration camp, run by Heinrich Himmler, is what he said he saw in his dad's files. The camp is very far away, so I imagine we will have to take a train to get there. An hour goes by, and I was right. We get on a train not too far outside Berlin. I see hundreds of men, women, and now even a few children holding their heads in despair while making their way towards the train. Till this day, I can see their faces. That is the end of Neanderthal Storytime 2. Thank you for listening.